Hey everybody, MTG Orzo here with another EDH Commander deck tech overview of this idiot, Arjun the Shifting Flame. So if you didn't watch the Izuri Commander overview because you didn't feel like it, I'm doing these guys at basically the same time. So Commander 2015 came out about a month ago, and all the cards for Moto only came out widely available maybe like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. So I've put together this deck and Azuri Claw of Progress, and we'll be running them concurrently in a sort of special Commander 2015 Gauntlet. So we're gonna start. Basically, it's gonna rotate back and forth. Like I'll put up his game, and then one of these games, and then you get the idea. You'll see when you fucking see the upload. So you know how this goes. I'm going to go over this deck, talk about it, and we're gonna play some games with it. So let's go over the commander. So Arjun the Shifting Flame is a 5/5 for 6 legendary Sphinx wizard with flying. Whenever you cast a spell, put the cards in your hand on the bottom of your library in any order, then draw that many cards. So that is basically his ability is, where is it? It's Mind Moil from Ravnica. So basically, whenever you cast a spell, you get to draw that many cards. Like, you get to draw as many cards as you have in your hand. So this deck is all about me drawing cards and doing stuff to them. It's sort of like a Niv-Mizzet deck, but instead of using like Niv-Mizzet as the commander, we use Arjun so that we can usually find a Niv-Mizzet or ways to find them. So none of the lands are very interesting. We've got islands and we've got mountains. Anything interesting? Bunch of duels. We're running both of the artifact lands, Seat of the Synod and Great Furnace, because of Tezzeret. So Tezzeret can fetch them for -0 and sort of ramp you that way. 0 mana, we've got Ancestral Visions, Ancestral Recall with Suspend, and Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, Mana Vault. I run Mana Vault in this deck because I do want to get Arjun out pretty early, and I do need to eventually pick up the Master's Edition of Mana Vault so it matches my Soul Ring and my Mana Crypt. We've got Ponder and Preordain because they draw stuff. Faithless Looting draws 2 for 1 and has Flashback. Vandal Blast is great for turn 1 Soul Rings and then is pretty good throughout the rest of the game. 2 mana, Cyclonic Rift. I mean, I know a lot of people get fucking butthurt about this card, but it's a card. Fucking deal with it. Jace's Erasure. It's a very slow win condition. Whenever you draw a card, you may have target player put the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So usually it's just you put cards in their graveyard. Like if they're a graveyard deck, I'm not going to do it. But normally we're drawing enough cards to make this inconvenient for them. Negate, just a nice little counter spell. Whirlpool Rider, the first of the 3 Whirlpool cards from Apocalypse. It's a 1/1 Merfolk for 2. When it enters the battlefield, shuffle the cards from your hand into your library, then draw that many cards. So it's just a good way to see more cards, which is all we want to do in this deck, is see as many cards as possible. Oh, excuse me. We've got Counterspell, just straight up. We've got Fork, because double blue and double red play nicely on each other in the 2 mana slot, but this is just a fun card to throw into red decks. Anvil of Begarden. Players have no maximum hand size. At the beginning of each player's draw step, the player draws an additional card, then discards a card. I wanted a Howling Mine effect in here, and this one is good because it gives you the bonus of having no maximum hand size, which is good. I want a lot of cards that say that, but you get to draw 2 and then filter it, so you end up drawing +1 instead of +2 because you have to discard 1. So that's what I went with. Cold Steel Heart, there's some acceleration, so is Iron Mirror and Silver Mirror. Where are they? Silver Mirror. Is it Signet and Mind Stone. And then the newest addition to the 2 mana drop, mana rock family is Thought Vessel. You have no maximum hand size, add 1 to your mana pool. Very well designed card, very cool, I love it. 3 mana, we got Bonded Fetch. One of my, I really like this card just in the way it's designed. It is a 3 mana 0/2 defender with haste. You can tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. It's just my favorite looter in the game. Fuck Jace. Fuck Jace. Chasm Skulker, because we're going to draw a bunch of cards. So we'll put a bunch of counters on him. Compulsive Research, my favorite blue draw spell, just in the game. I love this one. Laboratory Maniac. If you get Arjun and Mind Moil and like Thought Reflection, like you're gonna draw your deck in like 2 turns when you cast 2 spells. So Laboratory Maniac is an important card to have on the field. You need to make sure he's on the field before you would draw the last thing. But we do have ways to prevent ourselves from getting milled out if we do not want to. Sphinx's Tutelage. In the same way is another win condition. Whenever you draw a card, target opponent puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. If they're both non-land cards that share a color, repeat this process, and you can pay 5 and a blue to draw a card, then discard a card. So this is just great to plop down turn 2 or 3, and then just draw cards over the course of the game. If they're monocolored decks, they can go fuck themselves, and everybody else is still a little bit inconvenienced. I really like this card. And it's got a Sphinx on it, but it's not Arjun, it's Alhammarret, who also makes a 2nd appearance in this list. We have the 2nd of the Whirlpool cycle, Whirlpool Warrior, 2/2 for 3. When it enters the battlefield, shuffle the cards from your hand into your library, draw that many, and you can pay red to sacrifice it, and then each player shuffles the cards from his or her hand into his or her library, then draws that many cards. So fun for the whole family. I really like this cycle. Jace's Archivist, Windfalls every turn for 1 mana. Wheel of Fortune is the best red draw spell in the game. Discard your hand and draw 7. Molten Psyche. Each player shuffles the cards from his or her hand into his or her library, then draws that many cards. If you have Metalcraft, it deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of cards that player has drawn this turn. So this card's better in like a Nekazar list, but in this list it's still pretty good. It can do some damage. Dak Faden, just a great blue-red planeswalker. Draws cards, steals artifacts, has the irrelevant ultimate. I guess it's not irrelevant because we have like Staff of Nin, and Nimezit, but it's pretty irrelevant. And then Diviner's Wand. So this is a 3 mana tribal artifact wizard equipment. The equipped creature has, whenever you draw a card, it gets +1/+1 and gains flying until end of turn, and pay 4, draw a card. Whenever a wizard enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach Diviner's Wand to it. Equip 3. So basically it means that Arjun gets fuck huge, and you can smash, and then you can pay extra mana to draw more cards. It's a very cool card to go in this deck, and we have a lot of other wizards that can take advantage of it. Phyrexian Metamorph, my favorite clone. Deep Anal, one of my favorite draw spells. Fact or Fiction, another very good draw spell. Whirlpool Drake, the last of the Whirlpool cycle. It's a 2/2 flyer for 4. When it enters the battlefield, Whirlpool, and when it dies, Whirlpool. Duretti, I'm trying out in this deck because he does red loot, and we can also get some of our artifacts that we want back. And his emblem isn't really important, but I don't know. I'm testing him out. He might come out. Flames on Kavu is just my favorite red card. It goes in pretty much every red deck I have. Hedron Archive is ramp and draw. Solemn Simulacrum is ramp and draw on a body. And Therian Dynamo is ramp. Alright, now let's get up to some cool cards. Let's get to some cool cards, you guys. Alright, Curse of Echoes. Aura Curse for 5 from Dark Ascension. Enchant player. Whenever enchanted player casts an instant or sorcery, each other player may copy that spell and may choose new targets for the copy. So you put this on a person, and basically you get all their ramp and removal and counter spells. So it's a lot of fun. I like this card. Mystic Confluence, the new blue card from the Confluence cycle from Commander 15. 5 mana instant, choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. Return target creature to its owner's hand. Draw a card. It's strictly better than Jace's Ingenuity. It's pretty much better than Dismiss. It's just an all-around very good card, and I'm glad I had a chance to pick one up. Because it's a cool card that will probably go in every blue deck I ever make, because it's just that good. It's like a fair Cryptic Command, and affordable too. Speaking of which, I don't run Cryptic Command in this deck, because that's not what this deck is about. This deck's not a control deck, really. It's more of a weird sort of combo deck. We've got Tezzeret the Seeker. He untaps our artifacts for ramp. He also searches for artifacts, which ramps us or gets us the artifacts we need. And, you know, his ultimate is achievable, and it can just sort of win the game if you have a bunch of stuff. Time Reversal shuffles his hand and graveyard into your library, and then we all draw 7 cards. Exile Time Reversal, just more draw. Mind Moil, we talked about, is the ability of Arjun, an enchantment from Ravnica. Possibility Storm, so the much maligned Possibility Storm. So it's an enchantment, 3 mana or 5 mana, 3 and 2 red from Dragon's Maze. Whenever a player casts a spell from his or her hand, now that's important because this doesn't affect Suspend or Commanders. That player exiles it, then exiles cards from the top of his or her library until he or she exiles a card that shares a type with it. So if you cast Psychosis Crawler, you would have to wait until you hit Thran Dynamo or Whirlpool Rider, because it's both an artifact and a creature. That player may cast the card without paying its mana cost, then he or she puts all cards exiled with Possibility Storm on the bottom of his or her library in a random order. Basically, this card just makes it fun. You can cast random stuff from your deck, and that's what I like. Alhammaret's Archive. Alright, it's a 5 mana legendary artifact from Magic Origins. If you would gain life, gain twice that much life instead, which is irrelevant. If you would draw a card, except the first one you draw in each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. So anytime I draw a card that's not the first card I draw in my draw step, I draw 2. So that's pretty insane. That's a cool card. Glad it exists. Gilded Lotus is ramp. Memory Jar is a 0 mana draw 7, which is very good. Great way to refill your hand to do some Arjun shenanigans. Psychosis Crawler is one of our win conditions. Power and toughness equal to the number of cards in your hand, and whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. Very, very weird looking card. Very good with Arjun. Like, it's kill on sight in this deck. Alright, 6 mana Spell Twine. Just a pet card in this deck for me. A 6 mana sorcery. Exile target instant or sorcery from your graveyard, and then do the same thing for an opponent's graveyard. Copy those cards. Cast them if able. Exile Spell Twine. So, like, you can get a... Maybe you want to get back a time... Or you can't get Time Reversal. Maybe you want to get a Mystic Confluence, and they've got, like, an Explosive Vegetation. And you can do that. Tomorrow Azami's Familiar. Okay, so this is the card I was talking about that prevents us from getting decked out. Because this is a 6 mana 1/5 legendary spirit from Kamigawa with a replacement effect on your draws that says if you would draw a card, look at the top 3 cards instead, put 1 into your hand and the rest on the bottom in any order. So basically why this card is important, A, it lets us take like 15-minute turns as we search for the perfect cards we want. So if we draw 7, we actually get to see the top 21 cards of our library. But it also means that you never draw anymore when this card is out. So if you have 0 cards in your library and you go to draw, your draw is replaced, and instead you look at the top 3. There are no top 3. The ability fizzles, and then you continue on your turn because you never drew, you never lost. It also means you can't win with Laboratory Maniac if this is on the field, because you can never draw a card. But usually it's good enough that if you're winning, you're fine. Force Fruition, whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player draws 7 cards. So this is just a way for them to get in on the fun. I don't have pretty much any hate on them drawing cards instead of like Molten Psyche, but it does mean that some decks just get like overburdened and can't do anything. Wild Evocation. Beginning of each player's upkeep, that player reveals a card at random from his or her hand. If it's a land card, put it on the battlefield. Otherwise, cast it without paying its mana cost if able. This is just a good, fun card to get people to do stuff. Grip of Chaos, another fun card. Whenever a spell or ability is put onto the stack, if it has a single target, reselected at random. So, I don't want you to Path to Exile my Sphinx. I would rather you Path to Exile your, I don't know, how about your Avacyn? That works for me. Niv Mizzet, we talked about, is like Psychosis Crawler. Whenever you draw a card, Niv Mizzet deals damage to 1 damage to target creature or player. He can kill creatures, which Psychosis Crawler can't. He is also a flying 4/4 with tap draw a card, but just another way to win the game with Arjun. Gate to the Ether, just like it's Wild Evocation for the top card of your library. Beginning of each player's upkeep, reveal the top card of his or her library, put it into play, or cast it. Or, well, you only get, I'm sorry, it's not like that. If it's an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land, put it onto the battlefield. If it's anything else, fuck off. Omen Machine is a little counterintuitive, but I really like this card. Players can't draw cards. Beginning of each player's draw step, exile the top card of his or her library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, cast it without paying its mana cost. So you can quickly get to a point where nobody has any cards in hand. They can't draw cards, and the only cards they can cast are from Omen Machine, and then they're put into Possibility Storm, and it gets crazy. Staff of Nin draws more cards in its removal, and people really overvalue this when they're trying to think of things to kill. So Staff of Nin is usually a priority for them. All right. Bigger stuff. What's going on over here? What's going on our top end? We got a couple more cards. Thought Reflections, another replacement effect. If you would draw a card, draw 2 cards instead. 7 mana enchantment from Shadowmoor, I believe. So what you can do is, so let's say you have Thought Reflection and Azami's Familiar out on the battlefield at the same time, and you draw the first card of your turn. So what you can do is replace your first draw with the replacement effect from Thought Reflection, which just says if you would draw a card, draw 2, and then replace both of those draws with the replacement effect from Tomorrow, and look at the top 6. So you can sequence it like that, and this just means you draw a shit ton of cards. Dragon Mage, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, each player discards his or her hand and draws 7 cards. So it's a flying 5/5 for 7 that Wheel of Fortunes when it hits somebody. Warp World is just dumb fun, and unless I'm like definitely winning, I'm probably just going to cast it as soon as I can. And then Ugin is just Ugin. He has a little failsafe button. So that's the deck. We're going to play some games. If you like this deck, I'm sorry you're not going to see it every day. Some days are going to be Azuri days. Some days are going to be Multiplayer Madness days. But I don't have a schedule going on great for this because I'm not a responsible adult. So I'll see you in the game.